Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our third group therapy session. Um, just want to give you a little updates on what's happening and specifically talk about your course project, and then we'll talk about this week assignment, which is analysis. Now, regarding your project, I've received multiple proposals. Some of them make sense, some of them kind of represent a type of fishing expedition where some of you keep submitting and resubmitting variations of things that possibly cannot work. Now, let's discuss a scenario that will not work. Let us say you deal with bakery and you're trying to change the process baking of cookies. Well, there's a certain steps in the process of baking that cannot be altered. That's just the way it is. It's sort of almost methodological specificity to actions of creating a product or service. So you cannot really alter those. For example, if you talk about implementation of DSL, right? Or implementation maybe creation of information system. Those are methodological step-by-step prescribed undertakings. You don't just change methodology, you don't just change the technical process of installing DSL. So those are not sort of changeable. Another possible unfortunate candidate would be a process that is governed by a particular policy. For example, in the field of medicine, maybe treatment of patients, maybe dealing with medical records. You can't change those processes simply because they are supervised by policies and procedures. It's a law pretty much. You cannot change the process unless you rewrite the law, unless you rewrite the policy. So this is also not a good candidate for a course project. It is not a big deal really if you don't get approval, let's say right now, right away, by the end of today, simply because you still have a chance of just doing just fine. Now, the benefit of actually having your course project topic approved is that I can tell you in advance whether your project will work or not. For example, some of you submitted proposals that clearly are too large. Now, if you have to model a complex process, then you may end up with 30-40 diagrams. Okay, simply because if you take data flow diagrams, right, you will have maybe 3-4 major processes, and if you have one of the processes decomposed and go to level 2, let's say, you're going to end up with 30 diagrams or so. Some of the submitted proposals are too simplistic and rely on business process automation. Really, some of you suggest just basic creating some sort of file system or database. They don't really serve the purpose of changing the business process. Those are insufficient in complexity undertaking. So keep thinking, keep asking questions, and I'll be happy to answer. Another thing, very few questions I actually have received. Most of it is just essay type of messages. So there's no real answer that I can give to those. Let us talk now about your assignment for this week. This is basically, I have it, comparative analysis of the following options. Now, so you have a scenario of a business, and you need to compare and contrast enterprise system, custom developed system, generic off the shelf, and system developed in-house. What is not needed is your opinion here. So this is not opinion piece. You have to submit an analytic report. How do you do analysis? Well, you compare and contrast those 4 alternatives. How do you go about comparing and contrasting? Well, first of all, you need to identify a set of criteria that you will be using for comparison. So this part will depend on you first identifying a set of 5, 6, or 7 criteria along which you're going to evaluate the options and come up with one. Let us say if you compare apples and apples, right? This is fairly easy to do because, well, they are homogeneous set. But if you compare apples and oranges and tomatoes, right, how do you go about it? And this is where a set of criteria becomes very important. For example, in order to compare apples, oranges, and let's say tomatoes, you may compare them based on sugar content. You may compare them based on density. You might compare them based on perishability at a given temperature. You can compare them on the basis of cost per pound and so forth, but those criteria have to be stated in advance. Otherwise, it's just an opinion. Well, I like tomatoes better than I like oranges, and apples are like the best. This is not the type of analysis that you're required to do. Now, once you identified a choice, right, you provide a justification why this particular choice is the best one based on the analysis, compare and contrast. You need to identify the intended functionality of the system. You can use case analysis or data flow diagram to do so. I suggest you start using visual paradigm. If you Googled, you'll find visual paradigm. This is a case tool that allows you to create various diagrams, and because you would have to create those diagrams anyway for your course project, you might as well start using it now. Now, I know for sure that they have free, I think it's called Community Edition, so you can have the free version of it. So you have to analyze the particular process. Now remember, use case diagram, it's just a cartoon. Actually, use case scenario goes with it, so you would have to document those steps, which process, and remember there's alternative steps, alternative scenarios. So you have to have those. Okay, now you have a model of the process. Because processes run across departments, they present an opportunity to create an information system that helps various functions. For example, customer service process may have interest of let's say HR, just to say see who the best customer service representative. It may run through inventory management. How do you accept returns? It may go through operations, for example, to find out what are the maybe complaints in regard to just making something, right? In regard to manufacturing or something, and so forth. And so when you have those multiple departmental perspective or function-based perspective on a process, those are usually represented by modules in the information system. The best example would be to say if you have a database, right, organizational database, that you will be able to identify HR, accounting and finance part. You will be able to identify manufacturing and production, and so forth. So you would have these 3 different modules, right, that system must comprise in order to actually support organizational process. Now, let us say, what if you have identified module? This module has to be built out of something. Let us say you have maybe HR-based system that allows for employees to create their own schedule. Well, you may say this system, this module will require first of all graphical user interface, right? Then you have to have some sort of database, right, that supports it. So you have two parts here. You have to have a database. You have to have an application that actually pulls the data and insert the data into the database. So using what language you would implement a graphical user interface? What sort of database you would suggest? Would it be MySQL? Would it be SQL Server? Will it be Oracle? Something else? I don't know. So you have to identify those options for each of the modules. Now, once you have identified the modules, of the system that will support particular process, right? You will have to perform some analysis, because you don't want to suggest or build a system that is too expensive, right? So if you remember the systems analysis and design course in planning phase, you would use something like feasibility analysis to determine that the benefits provided by your system actually outweigh costs. And so you would have to create the spreadsheet basically with calculations determining return on investment, total cost of ownership, break-even point, cost benefit analysis, stuff like that. Now remember, because no system actually breaks even in the first year, it's a multi-year exercise. Therefore, you would have to adjust for inflation. So you have to have some sort of factor, maybe 8% depreciation rate, or so on. 12, I don't know, you choose. It has to be reasonable. So you cannot put 20, you cannot put 1. 8% is usually depreciation factor that is considered okay. And that's it. So as usual, keep me posted if you have any questions. Send me emails with questions, question mark. I want to see question marks. Okay. And I hope all is well. Keep me posted. Bye.